We were talking a little bit about competitive juices before we got on the pod. But you know what gets me going when, like, I don't know if this gets you going, but like when somebody really feels they could guard you, but they can't.
Yeah, the problem is like, again, like when I lived in Charlotte, there was just such a plethora of talent. Like I remember just like just to put it simply, if you went to any pickup run in the city, there were going to be 5 or 6 overseas pro level players. And then if you went over the summer, like even more than that, and usually there was a lot of private runs and things like that. But in Tucson, like, and there are some good players in Tucson, but it's just there's just less of them. So it's rare that you find multiple of them in the same gym in the same run. And yeah, like usually when there's someone that tries to like step up and really defend, it's just that they're not physically capable. That's the big one. Is like I'm just bigger and stronger than most of the players that I play against. And so when I do get to over the summer here in Tucson, when the college kids come back and when the overseas pros come back, like I finally have like that, if I don't pick it up and meet this level of intensity, I could be in trouble kind of vibe. And like that's like it's almost like a competitive desperation that kicks in.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. It's like a drug, and I get it very rarely these days. But I was just talking to Combo before we got on the air. Like a bunch of the kids just got back in town because we're getting to the start of summer, and I'm like super excited. I'm like, here we go. It's gonna be a fun summer.
It is going to be a fun summer, man. We got to talk about the Boston Celtics, Jason.
Hell yeah, man.
Is Jaylen Brown actually Batman?
I don't think so. I mean, here's the thing. Jaylen Brown's really, really good. And there's multiple ways to look at this conversation. Like, how good is Jaylen Brown in a vacuum versus does Jaylen Brown deserve to be all NBA versus is Jaylen Brown the best player on his team? The best player on his team piece, I think Jason Tatum is a bigger, stronger, more impactful athlete. Jaylen's probably a little bit better in terms of measurables in the sense that like he's probably got a little bit quicker first step. He's probably a little bit better,
faster in a straight line.
faster.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
faster in a straight line, more vertically athletic. But
Mhm.
Tatum's like big, broad shoulders, 6'9" frame. Like he can guard centers in a way that Jaylen Brown can't. I also think that I think that Tatum is a substantially better passer, and I think that Tatum actually reminds me a lot of a lot of like the higher level offensive players in the league. Even though I don't think he's on the same level as like Steph, Jokic, Luka, like the offensive engines, right? But there is something to be said about the fact that like when Tatum's on the floor, Boston's offense just seems to function better. Like there's more ball movement. Like he kind of breeds a culture of making the extra pass and like trusting your teammates and all that kind of stuff. And I just think in general that kind of thing is more valuable than some of the high highs that Jaylen Brown brings to the table. Because I do think that Jaylen Brown's lows are lower than Tatum's. Would you agree?
Jaylen Brown's lows are lower than Tatum. I would agree, but when we're talking about the All NBA players, I don't think that Jason Tatum's consistency is that great, right? Like SGA, for example, like he doesn't really have that many bad games. Like when we're looking at
Mhm.
other All NBA players, like we see Tatum struggle at times. But I guess when you're comparing him to Brown, I guess that's right.
Yeah, so like to me, the with Tatum, there's so much focus on the offensive end, and like that's the thing. It's like the offensive stuff with Tatum is genuinely infuriating. Like his entire approach drives me crazy. Like I love when he operates from the perimeter as a passer, like when he's running inverted ball screens with the guards, drawing multiple defenders, and just throwing those kick out passes to Derek White or Drew Holiday, slipping out of it and getting wide open threes. And when he's kind of more functioning as an orchestrator of the offense, was it game 4 or game 5 against Cleveland? He had a stretch where the Cavs got it close. I think it was game 5. And the Cavs got it close late. They got it to like 3. I think it was like 88-85 in the early fourth quarter. And like he just had like this, it kind of reminded me of vintage LeBron when he's being lazy, where LeBron just kind of functions as like let me just see which way the defense is leaning, and then I'll rifle a swing pass to a shooter who's got a closeout opportunity, and then he'll get to attack. And like Tatum did it like 4 or 5 straight possessions, and they all got good looks out of it, and their offense function. And so I think that Tatum, there's so much focus on like him settling for pull-up jumpers and him being bad at pull-up jumpers and him constantly trying to grift for layups, grift when he goes up to the basket instead of going up strong. And all that stuff is valid. I just don't think it necessarily takes away from the fact that he does all of this other really good stuff. And honestly, I don't think Tatum is on the same level as the players at the very top of the league, but he's
Right.
certainly like entrenched in that like second tier. And he's very consistently like, there's a reason why he's been first team All NBA 3 years in a row. The dude's just healthy, and he brings like a certain baseline of basketball impact with all of his tools.
So against Cleveland, I didn't think the Boston Celtics were playing very good basketball. You ask anybody around the NBA, like no championship run is easy, no playoff run is easy. But do you feel Boston's path? I mean, I guess some of it was deserved, right, from their dominance in the regular season. I guess regular season matters in this regard. But do you think the Boston's path in these playoffs so far have been a little bit easier than most? Also, we're seeing Halliburton's injury now. Like, what have you think about their path? And do you think they're playing championship level basketball?
I don't think that's up for debate. Like, I mean, they certainly got lucky. Now, I think some of the conversation surrounding the East is overblown in the sense that, like, I think the bottom of the East is bad. Like, it's bad, like so bad that like when you're playing, like think of it this way: when you're in the Eastern Conference, you play the Western Conference teams twice, and then you play the rest of your schedule against the East. So in an 82 game schedule, you're playing 52 games against the against your own conference. And so there's no doubt that a lot of the metrics and a lot of the standings can be, the data can be somewhat poisoned by the fact that you're playing so many games against bad teams at the bottom. But I think teams at the top of the East are more or less on similar levels to the middle of the pack teams in the West, right? Like,
Right.
I think the Bucks are a good team. I think the Knicks are a good team. I think the Pacers are a good team. I think the Sixers are a good team. I think all those teams are legitimate. And what happened is all four of those teams got stuck on the other side of the bracket. And so Boston got to face Cleveland, a team that I think is deeply flawed. Orlando, a team that's just too young and has like not enough offensive skill. And then the Miami Heat team that because of injury just wasn't a real threat this year. So like some of it is the East just happened to have three easy teams that all lined up with Boston. But like you always have to get lucky to win a championship. There's never been a team that made it to the finals without getting lucky in some way, shape, or form. So like I don't think it's necessarily worth discussing. As far as Boston, in whether or not they're playing at a championship level, this is the beauty of the 7 game series piece. Like they're probably not playing with the requisite level of urgency. Tatum's probably not playing as well as he needs to play. It is infuriating to me how inconsistent they are defensively. Like they were so much better defensively last night after being really bad in game one. And so a lot of that is true, but they have home court advantage. And like when they get to the finals, they'll probably be the more rested team, the more healthy, less beat up team. Like that kind of thing is going to make up for any sort of gap. And then also look at Dallas and Minnesota. The only guy in either of those teams that has like real NBA finals experience is Kyrie Irving. Jaylen Brown's been there. Jason Tatum's been there. Al Horford's been there. Like Derek White's been there. Those guys have been at that level. They'll be a little more comfortable. So I think any sort of we're not ready yet is going to be canceled out by home court and experience for Boston.
Well, when we're looking at Minnesota and Dallas, we're not seeing lack of a sense of urgency, right? Like both these teams really want it. With that said, do you think whoever wins that series wins it all?
I will be really tempted to pick the Western Conference team over Boston because of that urgency, because they've been playing do or die basketball for a month and a half, because I do think that Luka is a better player than Jason Tatum. Anthony Edwards, I think Ant will be better than Tatum within like 12 to 18 months.
I like his game better. I don't know if we could say he's better yet, but that's a lot of players for me with Tatum. You know,
that's a perfect way to put it. I like Anthony Edwards more than Jason Tatum. I think that like the specific thing with Ant that I think will separate him from Tatum in the long run is Ant just is so unbelievably quick off the first step that he can get to his spots in a way that Tatum can't. And so I do think that in the long run, Ant will be better than Tatum, but like Ant just had like a really bad game one.
Right.
Whereas like Tatum's bad games, like at least he's a little bit more impactful as a playmaker and as a defender. And so like for me though, like Ant is certainly capable of outplaying Tatum when he gets to the finals, but Luka is a guy that I think is better than Jason Tatum right now. That said, all of that to me doesn't like make up for the fact that Boston is just incredibly talented. I was thinking about this the other day. They have 4 guys who make at least 30 million. None of them don't deserve it. Like Porzingis deserves to make 30 million. He's a good rim protector guy.
He's
He
their
can
best
shoot
player.
threes.
He's their best player, Jason.
Arguably, right? And then I would pick Tatum, but like he's a really good player.
Right.
Porzingis is like I wouldn't say Porzingis is their best player. What he is he's that guy like when he's not there, they look like a different team, which is a credit to him.
He makes them unique.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And so you have Porzingis deservedly makes 30 plus, Drew Holiday deservedly makes 30 plus, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White makes like 18 million and he deserves to make 30 plus. So they basically have like 5 guys that are considered like fringe max contract level players, and all of them deserve it. So like a lot of times I'm like, don't overthink it. This team's really good. So like whoever comes out of the West, it's going to be a dead heat for me in the finals. I'm leaning towards picking the Western Conference team, but like I want to wait until we see what happens in this Western Conference Finals series.
It's great to see Luka and Kyrie playing so well together. What were your initial thoughts when that pairing came together, and are you surprised at all that they made it work so well? I do feel like it's more Kyrie than Luka for the reason that it is working so well.
So I think it's a natural basketball fit that we saw with LeBron, which is basically like,
100%.
If Kyrie is the number one, like we saw in Boston, or even like in Brooklyn, and like I think some of the revisionist history with Brooklyn is stupid because like they were really, really good, like they were really good, you know. But when I look at the failures of Brooklyn in 2022 in particular, when they ran against like a really good perimeter defense like Boston, all of a sudden Kyrie and KD looked pretty redundant. It's like, here comes Kyrie running a ball screen and missing a pull-up too.
It seems like this is a common thing with KD. Like there's more redundancy this year. There's a lot of that. Yeah, the best fit has been Steph Curry with him.
For sure. And by the way, that's on KD for like he's looking to partner with guys who play just like him
because he likes their game, because that's the perspective he looks at basketball through.
Exactly. And like really what KD should be looking for is someone who does everything he doesn't, you know, and basically look to complement whoever that player is, right? But I do think it's fascinating that Kyrie works so well with LeBron and with Luka, in the sense that like Luka and LeBron are offensive engines. They can legitimately take the keys and spam high pick and roll or whatever it is that they do for 66% of the game and just generate quality shots for themselves and for their teammates. And then whenever they want to rest while playing, they can go, like that was what LeBron used to do with Kyrie. He would literally go stand on the left wing or the right wing about 26, 27 feet from the basket, and he could shoot the catch and shoot 3 there. And he would basically just rest while Kyrie would just co-opt these possessions and go to work. And if I remember in the 2016 finals, in the first 4 games, Kyrie had all of these possessions where he would just dribble up the floor and like take like 20 dribbles, never pass the ball, and then shoot the ball. And I remember sitting there thinking like, this is so strange to me. And then it clicked and I understood. I was like, LeBron's asking him to do this. LeBron is asking him to be like, I need you to just take over possessions and so that I can rest while I'm on the floor. And then that'll allow me to have the energy to carry us home. And so I think that's the natural mix with Luka. And then the second piece of it is like, I think Luka is a very slow and methodical player, and Kyrie has just brought pace and verve
100%.
to what they do. And he kind of represents almost like the fastball to Luka's changeup. And I think that has made it a really perfect fit. And then honestly, like you got to credit the Mavericks. They just did an amazing job since that trade. I remember saying, I was in Breckenridge skiing when the trade went down. And I remember saying like, don't judge this trade in the first year. They're going to need a summer to surround these guys with the requisite players. And it's like the Derek Lively signing, the Grant Williams trade. You could talk about the Grant Williams trade all you want. That salary was what they used to go get other players. The PJ Washington move, the Daniel Gafford move, Derek Jones Jr. was like the home run veteran minimum signing of the year. Like he did an amazing job on Anthony Edwards in game 1. So like you got to credit the Mavs too. Like they just gave them the pieces they need to accentuate what Kyrie and Luka do so well.
Yeah, and a lot of this is also Kyrie's maturity, right? Like, you know, he won a championship with LeBron, so that duo is at this point more successful than the Luka Kyrie duo. We'll see how it plays out. But I mean, there obviously was friction in the locker room. I wasn't in the locker room, but he called LeBron apologizing like 2 years later, like, oh, I know how hard it is to be a leader. And I think he probably gets that more now playing with Luka. So his experience with LeBron helped him so much with this new experience with Luka.
Yeah, I think Kyrie was going through a little bit of an identity crisis there after after that LeBron sequence. Because like I bet you if you actually asked Kyrie now and he was in a position where he was being truly honest with himself, he probably would have just stayed in Cleveland until his contract ran out, and then he would have looked to go potentially sign somewhere else. Like
it's easy. It's easy to say that now, Jason, but as a young player, like you just want to be the best player on your team. You want to find the best situation. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's what I
Yeah.
mean by identity crisis. Like I think that circa 2017, Kyrie started to get sick of the like LeBron is the best. He's carrying everything. And like I think he started to get a little bit of like the I'm underappreciated syndrome. And I think that was what caused him to want to go to a place like Boston, because he knew that they had all the talent in the world and it would be basically a test of his abilities as a number one, right? And then he pretty quickly found out that actually that's not great. He works better when he's complimenting another player. So then he goes to Brooklyn. Then there was all of like this distraction stuff. And it wasn't just the COVID stuff. A lot of it had to do even with a lot of it just had to do with like his like personal life. Like remember that first year when he just like I think it was like his sister's birthday or something, but he just left the team for like a week. You're like, like he was going through, I think, some struggles in terms of just like where his focus was in basketball. And then honestly, like when he left Brooklyn, I don't think I think people associated that with more of the Kyrie flakiness, because the other ones were flakiness, like leaving Cleveland, that was flaky. The first year and all of the a bit like leaving the team without telling anybody, that was flaky. The last year and all the off-court stuff, that was kind of flaky. When he left Brooklyn that final year, I literally thought it was just a financial decision. He couldn't extend with Brooklyn because Brooklyn was done with him. And so he needed to get a new deal. And if he would have gone to free agency, his options would have been severely limited to just sign in trades and teams with cap space. So he literally thought, if I get traded at this deadline to a team that actually wants to extend me, that was effectively his free agency. He was going into free agency in that trade deadline. And so honestly, I think we're now on the other side of all of this, and Kyrie is kind of more at peace with who he is as like a bona fide number two that can play next to some of the best players in the league. And he's thriving in Dallas. And like I actually do think that he's very like stable now in a way that he didn't used to be.
Okay, so I want to shift to all NBA teams, and I'm going to read this all NBA first team to you. I'm sure you know it already, but I'm going to read it out. Giannis, Luka, Shea, Jokic, Tatum. What comes to mind when you hear this list?
These are all, to me, like your absolute foundational 82 game stars, meaning like these are the guys. Like there you can get into splitting hairs about specific players and whether or not they're capable of leading a team to a championship in a playoff run, or like if there's a game 7, who would you rather take, LeBron James in year 21 or Jason Tatum or whatever. Like you can get into all those kinds of debates, but like I was literally sitting there thinking when I saw the first team all NBA piece from Jason Tatum today, like at a certain point, there's a ton of value in, hey, we're going into training camp on October 1st. This dude's going to be available for 70, 75 games at a minimum. This dude's going to have like a certain requisite, like athletic ability to impact winning every single night. And these like baseline skills that we can build a team around. And like Shea, Luka, Jokic, Tatum, and who was the fifth? It was,
It's Giannis, Luka, Shea.
Giannis.
Yep.
Yeah, Giannis is a great example. All 5 of those guys are just classic foundational superstars that you can build a franchise around. I have zero complaints.
Okay, so Jalen Rose comes out and says NBA jobs are becoming extinct for players from the States, and 4 out of the 5 of these guys are international players. Yeah, it came out. You look surprised, but it did happen. And he starts talking about like the determination aspect of it, right? But I don't like. Why do you think, Jason, that the top of the league is more international players? Now, I don't think it's a skill development thing, because we have a heavy skill development culture in this country, almost to I'm a skill development guy, almost to the degree that it's too much. Like we're seeing players at the top of the league like Jason Tatum that look like they're doing drills in a game, in a sense. I know some people won't get what I'm saying, but I think you get what I'm saying here. But what do you think American players have to do to get back to where we're having first team All NBA have 4 out of 5 players from the States?
So I literally think it's the overemphasis on skill development and like
I literally think it's the
it.
same thing.
Yeah, and like to me, the skill, like I was talking about this last night with Tatum as it pertains to like the Drew Hanlon kind of conversation. Like, I don't think what Drew Hanlon teaches Jason Tatum is wrong. I think that those are important things for him to work on. I think it's all about approach. And like let's take a look at those the international guys. And I'm not really considering Shea in this. I'm more looking at Giannis, Luka, and Nikola Jokic. One, there needs to be a massive increase in focus on physical strength. Like that is one of the most underrated skill development pieces for American basketball players. We have so many skinny finesse players.
It's
Go
funny
ahead.
though, when you were playing in college, probably, and when I was playing in college, like the emphasis was like get bigger and stronger for college.
Oh my gosh, it was everything. Like that was literally what saved my college career, really. I was 205 pounds as
Right.
a my first year, and I ended up having a foot injury, and I just got in the weight room all summer and put on like 20 pounds of muscle, and it allowed me to guard bigs. And then that basically transformed the type of player that I was. Like to me, physical size and strength, we like to. I'll never forget. I was watching RJ Barrett shoot corner threes for the Knicks last year, and I think it was in the Heat series. And he was knocking him down. He was like super stoked about it after. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm like, this game is going to have very little to do with knocking down corner threes. This is going to be a damn bloodbath. Like this is going to be all about like physical screening, fighting through screens, battling on the glass, like trying to turn like all of this like really deeply physical stuff. And like that to me is one of the most underrated traits. Like Giannis dominates games because he's bigger and stronger than everybody. Jokic dominates games because he's bigger and stronger than everybody. Luka, look at Luka. It's like Jaden McDaniels is one of the best perimeter defenders in the world. Luka doesn't even see Jaden McDaniels because he's too damn thin. And so he can just get by him or get to his spot whenever he wants. And so I think that's a part of it. And then the second piece of it is like we focus on the skill development piece, but I think that what's super, and we saw this with the Suns, so much of basketball now is read and react.
Right.
And so like it doesn't matter how good you are to pull up jump shot or how many dribble combinations you can hit to get to your spot if they're showing high on ball screens or they're doubling you in ISOs. Like it really it just comes down to making decisions, attacking closeouts, quick read and react type of decision making. And that's the thing. What makes Luka so good is when you throw the aggressive coverages at him, it doesn't work because he can beat you with the skip pass. He can get the ball to the short roll man every single time. Obviously, Jokic can do the same thing. Giannis is starting to get better at that, but he's basically just a physical wrecking ball. And that, by the way, that's why I have Giannis behind Luka and Jokic. But like again, I think the basketball IQ, like decision making piece, is massive. And so I'll give you one last example. When I train my kids, my skill training does have a heavy skill a piece to it. And like usually what we'll do is we'll get in there, we have an hour, and for 30 minutes, we'll do skill development. But I've been doing the exact same thing in the last 30 minutes every single day now. I set up in 3-on-3 and I do a basic, 5-out entry. So like I'll run like Chicago action or like a horn set, horns chest, or I'll run stack pick and roll, something along like a basic 3-man interchange. And then I just want them to spam it. And I'll tell the defense, I'll be like, you guys decide what you want to do. If you want to switch, if you want to trap, if you want to drop, whatever you guys want to do what you want to do. And then I'll basically just have them for 30 straight minutes play 3-on-3 with ball and player movement, because like I want them to just get better at reading the floor. I want them to get better at seeing what's happening in front of them and making those decisions. And so I think those are the big pieces for player development. Is like when you get to the NBA, it's not just all spread pick and roll. It's not. You have to be able to work with an advantage and make decisions in when you have an advantage. That to me is a hugely underemphasized piece of skill development, in my opinion. What is your opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was leaning to exactly what you were saying, but in the States, in America, and I'm a guy who still works on his game to this day for no reason. Like
Yeah, me too, man.
I take like 3 or 4 hours a week just working on my skills, like as a basketball player. So I love skill development, but I do think in this country, there's a lot of trainers, coaches, and players trying to get better at skill development than instead of getting better at basketball, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
they're just getting better at the skills and drills and not really getting better at basketball.
Think about like a step back three. Like I worked, especially over COVID. The two things I mainly worked on over COVID was like the dramatic footwork for step back threes where I needed to get lots of separation. And then all the post footwork for like left and right shoulder fades. The those shots have served me well in very small doses. Like if it's a pickup game and I need one bucket, I'm going to the right block every single time. I'm calling for the basketball. I'm reading which one of my shoulders the defender's fading or favoring, and I'm fading over that opposite shoulder. Because if I drive into the lane, they're going to foul me, and there's no reason to take a three. I can get closer to the basket, right? But that's the thing is like outside of these very isolated situations where tough shot making has value, it doesn't really help you that much. By far the biggest area of improvement for me as a basketball player over the last 10 years has just been reading the floor. Just the reps and reps and reps.
100%.
Because when I was in college, I was just basically an athlete, and now I'm a ball handler. And so I needed lots and lots and lots of reps like reading the floor. And like that to me matters as much, if not more, than the skill development piece.
Yeah, I mean, put it like this: if you have all the skills but don't know when to apply them, you'll just be running through a wall.
Yeah, and we all have been with that guy that can. We all have played basketball, pickup, whatever it is, men's league, with a guy that like can make tough shots, but you're like, why are you taking that shot?
Yeah, and it'll look really good on Instagram, the ones he does make, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll think this
And
guy
I've done that before too.
Like that this guy should be a legit pro, but then if you watch him over the course of a whole game, you're like, oh, like we see why you're not a legit pro.
Yeah. Exactly. And like I have found too, like even like when I need to get a three, I have found that the highest percentage way for me to do that usually is like just sprint into a movement three rather than to go off the dribble. So like I can go off the dribble if I need to, but like a lot of times like I'll just whoever has the basketball, I'll just kind of have him dribble at me with the dribble handoff, and I'll just sprint off of it and like do my right left and then rise up and knock down the shot, because like that's a fundamental basic way to get a quality look off from three without me having to dribble the air out of the basketball. Like it's so interesting to me that development piece, because like there's value in it, but like you can overemphasize in it. And part of the problem too is like, you know why you and I like working on skill development too? It's not just because we like to be good. It's not just because we like to use it when we play. A big part of it too is like when you go to the gym by yourself, it's just easy to do. Like it's hard. You can't get reps with read and react in the gym by yourself. You can only get them playing. 100%. And so you can get into the habit of like, I'm in the gym by myself, like time to work on this, time to work on that. And it's like a lot of times you actually do need to just play so that you can and that's what I do the 3-on-3s for with the kids. Like I just want to see if an entire summer worth of hours and hours and hours of 3-on-3 makes us a better 5-out offense when we get to October, right? Like that's what I want to see.
All right, moving on to second team. Should Tatum have been on this team and Jaylen Brunson been on first team? That's the glaring thing for me. You've been a big, Brunson guy for a long time now. I feel like he's done more with less this season. I feel like Jason Tatum had a way better supporting cast. And yes, there's been some injuries with Celtics, but the Knicks injuries were ridiculous. And Jaylen Brunson led that team to be a very good team, even with all the injuries. What are your thoughts on that? Was that fair, Jaylen Brunson being second team? He also got some MVP buzz during the course of this year. Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
It's the inconsistency that's frustrating. So, for instance, like the same case for Tatum over Jaylen Brunson is the same case for Jaylen Brown over Domantas Sabonis, right? Like Sabonis had a more important role for a team that more desperately needed him to be great.
Right.
So like in theory, you're like, okay, so like even though Jaylen Brown, like I think we all agree, if you had to choose to have one player on your team, Jaylen Brown or Domantas Sabonis, you're taking Jaylen Brown 10 out of 10 times. Like there's no doubt.
Kind of because like you need every position, but kind of that is also because the way the modern NBA game is played, right? Like Jaylen Brown is such an important archetype of player.
Well, think of it like this. Think of like league average replacement. Like, would you rather have Jaylen Brown in a league average center? So, like, let's call it Nick Claxton. Like, would you rather have Jaylen Brown and Nick Claxton, or would you rather have Domantas Sabonis in like a league average wing, like a Patrick Williams or something like that?
Caleb Martin, maybe.
Or Caleb Martin. That's the point. Is like I would rather have Jaylen Brown and Nick Claxton because I kind of
like Nick Claxton too.
Yeah, Nick Claxton's awesome, but like I can build my pick and roll coverage around him, and I know my defense is going to be pretty good, and I know that Jaylen Brown is just a more reliable type of offensive threat in like Sabonis is one of those guys over the 82 that can put you in the blender, but like once you start scouting for him and you put a big strong forward on him that can like look at what the Warriors did to him last year in the postseason. It's like all of a sudden he can't bully him and he can't shoot over him, and now it's an issue. But as far that's kind of the way I look at the Tatum Brunson piece. Like it's maddeningly inconsistent, but like are we rewarding players for degree of difficulty or are we ranking them in a vacuum? Because if Tatum is over Jalen Brunson, I get it from the perspective of if you were drafting like what is it you used to do in Madden where you would like sometimes you would just do like the whole draft of the league, right? And everyone would take Tom Brady with the first pick or whatever. Right. Like that if you did that with the league, like the entire 450 players, every GM in the league's taking, or at least most of the GMs in the league are taking Tatum over Brunson, right? Like Tatum's a better basketball player overall than Jalen Brunson, in my opinion. It's not, Brunson has shrunk the gap in a big way this year, and I think he's demonstrated. I think you can make the case he's the best small guard in the league right now. But like, but I think you most likely draft Tatum first. So like from that perspective, I understand having Tatum first team. But then why isn't Jaylen Brown in an All NBA team? So it's just the inconsistency that's frustrating. But to me, Jalen Brunson second team feels right to me. Like, would you agree that like Jalen Brunson feels like somewhere between the 6th and 10th best player in the league right now after the season that he had?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to this kind of what I was saying before. Yeah, 6 to 10 sounds about right because of the two-way impact of a lot of those guys 1 through 5, right? I mean, Luka's getting better now, two-way impact. So
he's getting there. You agree? You take Jokic 1, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then would you take Luka 2?
Yes.
Okay, I would take Giannis 3. Would you take Giannis 3?
Yes.
Okay, are we thinking Embiid 4?
I'm going SGA because I mean, health matters. You know?
Okay, SGA makes sense to me. What do you have at 5, Embiid or Tatum?
I like Embiid better. Yeah.
Okay, so Tatum's and to me that feels about right too, because Tatum to me is right around the 6th or 7th best player in the league, right? So Tatum is 6-ish, right? And so we're already getting into the 7, 8, 9, 10 range anyway. And I'm excited to get into this summer, but like because like I haven't even really tried to think about player rankings, but it's like also how far are we dropping Steph after a pretty tough season? Like where do we put LeBron after he legitimately was awesome the majority of this year? Like there's so many different like the league is just stacked, and so it's tough to say. But to me, Jalen Brunson second team in that 6 to 10 range just kind of seems right.
Okay, we'll round this out. You mentioned LeBron James, who has become the youngest and oldest player to ever make an All NBA team, which is pretty incredible. Speaks to his longevity. But we have Devin Booker, Steph Curry, who you mentioned, Tyrese Halliburton, LeBron James, as I mentioned, and Domantas Sabonis, as you mentioned. All right, so we rounded out the list. Who's the biggest snub? It might come back to the guy we started out talking with this conversation. We started talking about with this conversation with Jaylen Brown, but Wemby's another guy we might have snubbed Wemby. Like, who has been the biggest snub for you?
Man, yeah, you could make the case Wemby is just better than Sabonis right now. The other guy that I looked at this morning for a Jaylen Brown swap, like if you just wanted to tell me Sabonis was the anchor of everything Sacramento did and he just deserves to be in there, whatever, even though I would disagree with you. Are we sure Devin Booker's better than Jaylen Brown?
I've been talking about this for a while now. I think Devin Booker, this doesn't really have to do with Jaylen Brown too much. I think Devin Booker missed his superstar window because I think it's almost impossible now to play a classic position slot and be a superstar. Like, look at the top 5 guys. They don't really play a position. They're like they're like all aliens.
All weird.
They're all dynamic. Like you can't fit any of them in a natural position. Anthony Edwards could get there as a classic 2-guard type player, but then he's like the best athlete in sports on top of it. So he's like weird in his own right. I think it's tough because Devin Booker really plays like a 2-guard, you know?
Anthony Edwards has looked different than every single 2-guard that's come to the league since Kobe. Like there's just like ridiculous. I should say Dwayne Wade, I would say. So like Dwayne Wade is the last 2-guard where you're like, oh my God, like this guy is just insane in terms of an athlete. But yeah, I think that's a good point. Devin Booker just plays too much of a traditional 2-guard role. Like he's not good enough to just be on the ball all game. Yeah. But he's not. But if you're going to be off the ball a lot, then you need to be a top tier defensive player to kind of enter into those conversations. The other thing with Devin Booker too is like his ceiling is outrageous. Like when we've seen him like in the postseason last year, even in that NBA Finals run in 2021, I thought he was pretty damn good for the most part. The problem with Devin Booker is like he gets a lot of soft tissue injuries and he and he really frequently is operating at somewhere below his ceiling. Like I felt like in this playoff run, Devin Booker looked like 85% of his normal self. But at the end of the day, if you're constantly operating at 85% of your normal self, maybe that's what you normally are. But like, there's no doubt that when Devin Booker does hit that sweet spot where he's like really healthy, really in rhythm, really conditioned, like operating at peak level, like he was in the Denver series last year, like that guy to me is like he's basically like a 6'6" Steph Curry, because he can
Right,
just shoot
right,
the ball
right.
so damn well, but he's just not there often enough. And that really is the main issue. And he's never developed well enough as like an on-ball guy that can just run action for entire, like Phoenix put the ball in his hands a ton this year, and he had like what 6.5 assists per game or something like that. So like, yeah, to me, Devin Booker is the guy that, I think he's a better offensive player than Jaylen Brown, but Jaylen Brown is like this profoundly impactful athlete. And like, I think if I had to pick a best player on a team, I'd rather have Devin Booker as my best player than Jaylen Brown as my best player, but I don't want either of them to be my
Right,
best
right. Like,
player.
where's that
And
really
if,
taking you with either of them,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So
Yeah.
if I had to choose a number two, you could argue Jaylen Brown just has so much other areas of the game that he can bring winning impact that he's probably better.
Wemby might be better than all of them, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, man. Dude, and he's like, have you seen some of the like I was looking around at at the volume we have this show called Nerd Sesh.
Right, right, right. No,
And yeah,
yeah,
Logan and
yeah,
Carson. They
yeah,
do
yeah.
great work. And they've done some Wemby videos that have done extremely well on YouTube. And then I started digging into it. Like, there is a massive appetite for Wemby content. And
Mm.
my show kind of missed this train this year because I so focus on the top teams in the league. But like, I'm going to kind of dive into that a little bit this summer and going into next season. Like, this dude might just take over the world, so to speak. Like, he might just become the most famous, the most popular, the most content, like content machine NBA player we've seen since like young LeBron.
Who's the best star to pair with them?
Man. So obviously you want some sort of perimeter kind of like offensive initiator engine type. Trae Young to me is like the cheap, easy way out. Like if you jump on that early, I'm not a huge fan. I have liked the idea because Golden State could use a center that could shoot. I like the idea of like Golden State just calling San Antonio and trading Chris Paul for Zach Collins because they get San Antonio can absorb CP3's contract into cap space, and it's a expiring deal, so it's not the end of the world, right? And then Zach Collins ends up being like a shooting center that they can play alongside Draymond if they want to go for a bigger look. And then I really like the Chris Paul fit as like a temporary fit with Victor Wembanyama. And then what that does is it makes you more interesting in the short term, gives Wembanyama the opportunity to play with a real shot creator that can kind of help sharpen up some of his off-ball skills, especially in ball screens. And then you wait, and you just wait for the right guy.